From Lewis in the Black Horse Pub. Good morning and welcome back. John Henty has just appeared at the window. I'm about to let him in. And in the meantime, we are going to play episode 4, as we promised, of the Bloody Past of a Tiny Town. At least I hope we are.
Vroom, vroom. The other day I felt a warmth between myself and Mole and Ratty, the two little characters from Wind in the Willows, as I sat on the banks of the River Ouse and let it drift by. Vroom, vroom. Today I feel more like Toad of Toad Hall, the animal that was always getting himself into trouble because of his excesses. Vroom. Horsepower is the essence of this episode.
How about you?
Because horses played a central part in the history of Lewis.
No, I'm not my usual spice life. 100 yards is beyond. Yes, well, what are you wise in a way?
Yeah, but it was that.
And as might be expected, were often at the centre of violence, adding to the history of a bloody town. Horses, of course, were nothing unique to Britain. Cavalry had been a major part of warfare, and peaceful farming from time to time immemorial. But for Lewis in early times, they were an important part of its economy. The Domesday Book, the first ever audit of England in 1086, records that anyone selling a horse in Lewis should pay to the reeve or estate manager a penny. The buyer also paid a penny. So a horse tax was in place more than 1,000 years ago. And so the horse took centre stage from the earliest of Norman times. I've shown you the tilting grounds where knights on horseback tried to unseat each other. But that was nothing compared to the violence that Lewis races brought to the town. But I get ahead of myself. Lewis was one of the most famous racecourses in history until 1965. The fourth oldest in the country, racing began in 1727. Although some argue there is evidence it was 26 years before that.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Lewis. It's the final race meeting here at Lewis, Monday, September the 14th, 1964. The ground is firm and the wind is straight across the course. The runners for the first race, the Cookmere Apprentices Handicap, are on their way to the start. Saucy Lad representing Tom Masson in the purple with the gold star. Number 11 is Nimberg. And away they go. They're off and racing, and Buzz made a bright start there and leads in the early stages. And now a little bit of a rise as they race past the mile marker and head towards the right-hand turn, which will bring them into the home straight. Closing stages with less than 100 yards left to travel. It's Buzz pulling clear, and Buzz goes on to win by about 3 lengths to Misty River in second, Saucy Lad back in third, Great Lady, Nimberg Wave, Methane, the Wolf, and St. Kieran.
In that year, after almost 300 years of horse racing, it closed down for good, mainly because it had no electricity, no running water, in fact, no facilities at all. Yet in the late 18th century it attracted royalty, the big gamblers of the day, and it produced some champion racehorses over the years that brought great races and great feats to an otherwise pretty but blustery track atop the Downs. Considered by racing folk as the greatest racehorse of all time, Eclipse raced there in 1769. The Derby winner of 1793, Waxy, was a Lewis-trained horse, as was Charlottetown in 1966. Great jockeys rode there, such as Lester Piggott and Gordon Richards. And Barry, you've, although it started in 1720 or so, you weren't here then, but you were, as a very young boy, involved in this racecourse.
Yeah, I certainly was, yeah. I'd say I was born on race day, 29th of August 1950. My mum's side of the family were all racing people, going back hundreds of years probably, so, you know, my gran used to take us up here.
It's very quiet and serene today, so what was it like on race days up here?
Very, very noisy. Hustle and the bustle of coaches coming up here, cars. I mean, all these places over here were car parks. You had all the horse boxes, the tote men, tic-tac men shouting the odds and everything else. Lots of entertainment going on, you know, and it was very, very busy. A 4-mile race which started right down the bottom of the hill there. The horses used to run right down there as far as you can see, and come back down here to the winning post.
Right.
They used to have 2 winning posts. They used to have a 5-furlong winning post and a 6-furlong winning post. But what they did, they made the 6-furlong winning post another furlong away from the stand, because they both wanted to start them on the straight. Otherwise it was unfair, so they had a straight run.
Right.
In 1914, I think it was 14, they shut that down because they found it was too dangerous. And not only that, for the horses to get up that hill. They used to start them from here, they run them down there, round the loop and back again.
Oh,
and
right.
that made 4 miles, but it had to be like the best out of 3 or something.
Right.
So some of them horses run 12 miles
Yeah.
just to win a race. They had 10 minutes break, they got back after about 9 or 10 minutes. They'd have a bucket of water, drink and wash down, and back they used to go again. After a while, it just phased out a little bit. It used to be a 3-day meeting in August, and then it got to that it was just going to be a day a year. And it got to the stage where it was just one race, and all the horses in that race were trained in Lewis. And the guy that wrote about it, you know, he said this is probably going to be the last day.
There are many in Lewis who are still resentful that the course was closed. It brought a good deal of cash to the town. Lewis had many racing stables, and a thriving racing community numbered as many as 60 establishments. But perversely, it was responsible for cleaning up the sport, despite suffering a bout of violence. The early part of the 20th century saw the rise of vicious gangs around the country. These gangs often fought each other, but to keep cash in their pockets, they targeted racecourses. They would secretly ease their way into courses and then meet up to viciously attack and rob bookies. Racegoers, and even jockeys. They were feared at race meetings throughout Britain. And so it was on a June afternoon in 1936. London villain James Spinks and his gang turned up at Lewis for an attack on bookies. They gathered, some 30 strong, on the edge of the racecourse, ready to pounce. And pounce they did. They attacked and savagely beat a bookie and managed to rob him. But not known to them, 2 CID officers had been posted in the grounds. The 2 detectives alerted their fellow coppers and raced towards the gang. According to some reports, a rival gang got into the act and all hell broke loose. It must have been some sight. Villains scattering in all directions. Keystone cops were in full chase, and the excited racegoers panicked and dived for cover. But it was the police on this day at Lewes Racecourse who passed the winning post. They managed to nick 16 of the gang, took them to Lewes, where they were sentenced to long prison terms. That put an end to the decades-old practice of course hijacking by these fearless and vicious gangs. A real feather in the cap of the Lewes coppers. Nabbed. Pulling you aside, locals will whisper in your ear that Graham Greene's Brighton Rock was really about Lewes Racecourse. They say the gang fight in his novel was based on the events of Lewes in 1936. To think that Pinky strode this course, what a ghost to have here now. Pinky wasn't in the pub, that's for sure, but I bet you he wouldn't have bought me a drink anyway. Talking of betting, the Prince Regent helped pack the crowds into Lewes Racecourse. The high and the mighty liked rubbing shoulders with him, and the humble and lowly liked rubbernecking. Accurate figures weren't kept in those early days, but estimates vary that crowds reached between 10 and 20,000 spectators. That was on special race days. The course also provided national champions, and one horse is buried here along with his rider, galloping the old Lewes Racecourse in perpetuity. But the love of horses by the Prince Regent could well have resulted in his early demise. He was a betting man and a daredevil. As I've mentioned, the future king drove a coach and four down this street. There is no written evidence that the story is strong enough for this sign to be erected by the local council. The prince was often in Lewes, and a renowned gambler was part of his inner circle. Sir John Larday, a successful racehorse owner, lived in Lewes, was colourful, resided on the High Street, and was a gambler and horseman. His wife Letitia was equally as colourful. Accomplished coach driver, she had been the mistress of a convicted highwayman. The Prince, Sir John and their circle were notorious enough from their lifestyle as it was. But hell-raising Sir John went down in history for a wager in Brighton. He bet a larger and heavier man that he could carry him piggyback over Steen. When the man showed up, Larday insisted the man stripped naked because the bet didn't include carrying his clothes. This was the street that the Prince Regent drove his coach and four down. I tried walking up it. That's tough enough. But coming down is oh, impossible! So speculation has it that it was Larday, or perhaps even his fascinating wife, who urged the prince to make the bet. History records that he won the bet, not on any betting slip, but because the prince went on to become King George IV. In an earlier episode, we took a look at the castle tilting ground. Tilting, or trying to knock an opponent off a horse, was originally military training. But later it became sport. Knights won large purses in tournaments and won accolades from ladies for their prowess. Ordinary folk couldn't compete. They were forced to be spectators, but they had their own violent sport, in the form of folk football. This precursor to our modern game raged across the countryside, with whole villages chasing a pig's bladder. It was so violent that kings from the 13th to the 17th century tried to ban it. But I digress. Tilting, of course, involved horses. And it was a sport that eventually gave way to a calmer pastime. The Lewes tilting ground became a bowling green in 1640. Not a horse in sight. But typical of Lewes, it still plays the game the way Sir Francis Drake played it. And it is said gave inspiration to Tom Paine to write his Rights of Man after playing here. The horse has never really disappeared from history. Fox hunting is recorded in Sussex in the late 18th century. But in Lewes, a traditional meeting of huntsmen on Boxing Day didn't begin until the early 20th century. Now, each year, the Southdown and Eridge huntsmen gather on Boxing Day ready to ride to hounds. As you might expect, this occasion has contributed to violence on Lewes High Street. Protesters have turned up for decades to protect the killing of foxes. It is now, of course, against the law to kill foxes this way. But it doesn't stop the protesters. Lewes is still a rural country town, so thousands turn out to cheer the riders down the high street. Clashes are inevitable, and each year they occur. No deaths, but the odd bloody nose, as being in a bloody tiny town. When the hunt meets outside, and there are loads of protesters in balaclavas and so on, who strides out with a stirrup cup, the tray held in the air, and offers a drink to the huntsman? It's Cliff. How does it feel going out to face the mob?
Well, I suppose it can be quite scary at times, but I kind of feel that it's very necessary to keep the tradition going, as the master of the house has done this for about 150 years or so. And I've just trotted out for the 29th year, the 29th time, with the stirrup cup for the Southdown and Eridge hunt.
So and you always do it, it's always you. Yeah.
It's something God willing, I'd like to keep going.
Well, you've got a cheering section in me, because I'm always there saying, "Go, Cliff, go!" I think it doesn't matter which side I take. It's a very brave thing to go out, and tradition is tradition, and it should be maintained.
I totally agree with that. And there's about 3,000 people out there cheering you on, so it's rather nice.
Now, when we're talking about horses, I mean, this is an old coaching inn.
Yes, well, it became an inn, a coaching inn, about 300 years ago. And I was doing a little study some years ago when I was looking at previous owners from that time. And within that 300-year period, I've just found out that I'm the longest standing owner in the whole period, in the whole time.
Yeah.
So, with 28 years to my name.
For many years, this town, like many in England, had horse-drawn vehicles of bread and milk delivered by horse-drawn cart. But remember the past and 63 pubs in Lewes. Yes, you've guessed it, so was beer. And it still is. So deep is the horse embedded in Lewes society that the remaining town brewery, Harvey's, still delivers its products in a horse-drawn dray. And it tastes all the better for it. Well, every other Tuesday you deliver in a very traditional way, do you not?
We do. We have our horse and dray wandering around the streets of Lewes. Lewes not very kind to horses, very steep hill, but they manage very well. and it's a marvellous attraction. I mean, it's a good tourist attraction, and I think the town have taken the horses to their hearts.
Well, I think that's very true. I mean, they're magnificent creatures. So I'm closing this episode on a relatively modern phenomenon. Horse whispering. This technique, made famous in a Hollywood movie, is often seen as a modern technique. But horse whispering has been around for centuries. They just didn't boast about it. That was because they were thought to be witches. Witches were executed in a variety of ways. But after a French horse whisperer in the 18th century was burned at the stake along with his horse, others kept quiet. There's no record that horse whisperers were ever burned in Lewes. We were too busy burning humans. But the craft stayed below the surface. Because Lewes was known for being a town of witchcraft. That's a story for another day. But whispering is alive and well in Lewes. The horse. A part of Lewes history from Saxon times to this very day. We've talked horses today. How the Lewes Hunt tears down the High Street on Boxing Day. How the Prince Regent risked his neck by driving a coach and four down Keir Street. And how the old Lewes racecourse at one time flourished, but today is lost. Thankfully, not forgotten. Oh, exhausting. I feel like a drink. No pub up here. Whoa!
Now, guess who's over my shoulder?
Ha!
Ha ha ha!
Good heavens! Well, that was interesting. My goodness, I learned a thing or two there.
Oh, did you?
Oh,
Oh, actually, I'm in a funny sort of way proud of the fact
yeah.
that the fight that is written about in Graham Greene's Brighton Rock actually took place on the Lewes Racecourse.
Yes.
Because actually the aftermath was, first of all, there were rather brave policemen who took on what the equivalent of the Peaky Blinders.
Yes, yes, yes.
But they bust people down from London to terrify and intimidate the judge and the jury in Lewes Crown Court and so on. And they all stood up to them. And it ended the terrorization of racecourses by these gangs, these violent gangs.
Those were the days.
Absolutely.
Those were the days. They didn't have any of these trite things like shoplifting and stuff. We had real roguery.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
And real judges. And I shouldn't knock the judges. I think probably jurisprudence is a reasonable shape. But
I tell you what, there was reference to witchcraft. You see, I mean, that's what I didn't know. There was a certain centre of witchcraft as well. And there's probably one or two. I did know a witch. I think I may have mentioned it before. A lovely, lovely woman. Actually, she was a white witch. That's very important.
yes, it is.
It is. She was a white witch. And if you ever wanted a story, then you went to her, because she would always come up with a really good story. And her name was, God bless her, or maybe I shouldn't say God bless her, I don't know. It was Doreen Valiente, and it's quite a well-known name. And she's written several books on witchcraft, actually. And she didn't live in Lewes, although no doubt she came over for the occasional soiree, throw all your clothes off and have a good time, which I thoroughly approve of. She actually lived in a council flat off St James's Street in Brighton, and invited me back to her place on one occasion, which was a little worrying. I thought, but it was all very straightforward. She did have a cat. It was a black cat, as you would expect. And I think with a smile on her face, she also had in one corner a broomstick. So whether or not she used it, I mean, Brighton buses are pretty good, and there's one just going past the window. Two of them.
Once.
I mean, that's typical of buses, isn't it? What they say about buses.
Now you'll wait for half an hour.
I know that exactly. Why is it? I always turn up at a bus stop and I see two buses going off in the other direction. It's hopeless. Mind you, a brother-in-law of mine who might be watching, hello there, John in Weston-super-Mare, but it's windy down there today. John, he has this theory that Brighton has probably the most amazing bus service. And if you ever stand in Churchill Square, I mean, there's bus after bus. I mean, how many buses do you need to take people to Whitehall? Well, there's a number one, then there's another one, number one, then there's another, I mean, thousands of people.
Yes, that's right.
Which we can't complain. And also, apparently, there's a bloke going around at the moment dressed as Father Christmas, the Santa bus.
And Santa bus.
Yeah.
I think that's an excellent idea.
Which is a good idea.
Absolutely.
Raising money.
Just before we leave witches,
Yes.
could I tell you that in our halcyon days,
Yes.
when you were at BBC Brighton,
Yes.
and I was at BRMB Birmingham,
I know that.
and I had a white witch on my phone-in program,
There you are.
and she was so popular it blew the switchboard. It was a phone-in.
People phoning
Yeah, and ATV, as it was then,
Yes.
heard and said, could they come and film for a thing they were doing on witches, the program, which they did.
Good Lord.
And from time to time,
Yes.
I get a call from people that I still know.
Yes.
You're on television,
Good, great.
and they made a thing called "They Don't Ride Broomsticks," do they? And they show it from time to time.
Yeah.
So my White Witch, along with your White Witch, is famous.
I think we should have a witch report.
Absolutely, yes.
Oh, no. I mean,
we could name it a magazine called Witch.
Yes, I know that. Which or what or why or who or where, which is what Mirador television is all, because that's what we ask: who, what, why, which, where, when, all beginning with W. Have you ever thought about that?
Yes,
all beginning with W. All the good things in life begin with W. Let's start thinking of all the good things in life that begin with.
Now,
I can't think of anything actually.
John, you scout around town.
Wallabies.
I mean, you're very well.
Yes, so wallabies. Yes, they're nice. We like
Yes.
they begin
Yes,
with
we like
W.
wallabies.
So I scout around town.
You scout around town
Yeah.
because I often see you from the safety of some place or other, and you talk to an enormous number of people. The journalist in you is just still so rampant.
Well, because
And you come here and you let me know and let our viewers know what's going on.
well, the point is, as we both know, everybody has a.
No.
We're now playing bumper cars, ladies and
Yeah,
gentlemen.
yeah.
No, I mean everybody has a story. We all know that, and I often think about that when you see, maybe I tell you what, there was a couple on television, some other channel. I can't remember what it was, and do you know they were celebrating? I think they were coming up to 80 years of marriage. 80.
A marriage,
marriage,
let alone life.
They actually married in 1942, and they're still together, all to be in a residential care home, but both together, and one about 103 and the other 104, and they're the longest. We should have had them on here. Really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
80 years together.
It's remarkable, isn't it? Incidentally, talking about longevity, at the moment, it's just started, and quite by accident I found it. I was just looking for a movie to relax me. Is one called Archie.
Yes.
And it's about Cary Grant.
Oh, really?
And his life. I always think of Cary Grant as being a smooth, debonair. Do you know when he was born?
Bristol?
No, when?
When?
Yes.
No, you tell me.
1905.
Good gracious.
Yes. And here he was
Oh,
playing the against Sophia Loren in the 1950s and 60s.
absolutely
Yeah.
right. Well,
Yeah, amazing.
he would often come back to this country, I believe. And there was one occasion in some pantomime happening in Bristol, and he happened to turn up at this pantomime. And my good friend, former friend, was Roy Hudd. And Roy Hudd was appearing in and for some reason or other, Cary knew Roy.
Well, he was a cabaret artist.
Oh.
As a young man, he was a cabaret artist.
Oh.
Yeah.
What Cary Grant was?
Yes.
What, singing, I suppose?
Got stilts as an acrobat.
Good
It's
gracious.
a remarkable early life.
Not to be taken for granted.
You know.
So anyway,
Boom,
here we
boom.
are. I know.
Yeah.
Laugh a minute every 30 seconds. Now, today is Thursday. It's a miserable day out there. It's horrible. It's windy. It's raining. So I thought we'd bring a little bit of sparkle as usual, which is a good idea. Desperately trying to write a few cards to people.
He's got the bag.
I know. I've got the bag over here. So I thought we might just, first of all, not that we're ageist in any sense. I mean, we're both clearly old people. Undeniably, we don't deny it. We are old. In fact, I am very old. In fact, I'm older than he is. Amazing.
Only just.
All right. Only just. Now, the thing is that a relative of mine, everybody's sending cards at the moment. Well, he sent me a card not so long ago, which I thought might amuse you. And it might amuse some of our viewers as well. So part of my little bag over here we are, this is it. And this begs the question here. It says, how old, it's a bit sparkly, I don't know if you can see that. It says, how old, don't worry, you're not old until, you see. Now, this is a test. Now, is it going to work? Normally, when I bring these things in, they don't work. It says, press here. So I'm going to do that and see what happens. Can you hear that? There it is. So there you are. Don't worry, you're not old until it takes you twice as long to look half as good. Now, is that not wonderful? Alternatively, there is another one. It says that your back goes out more than you do. So that's another one. Or it takes you. This is one. It was a happy birthday. Actually. It was a happy birthday. And these novelty things are absolutely amazing. The noises that they make and everything when they work, which they don't always do.
John, as you know that I don't see things the way other men do.
Yeah.
Television to me, what we're doing here, is allows other things to just happen. I mean, for instance, you've had a chat to Mark Maybe, who wants to bring a university.
Right.
Yes. Now, I know one of the things that you tried to do, and perhaps this television station could eventually start, is to start a bonfire museum.
Oh, yes.
What the reason I raise that is that I think that each week, week in, week out, you trot in with these marvelous old things. I mean, going back to when you were just, there is enough there for at least half a museum.
Yes.
And to be quite honest with you, is Mark Maybe, as you know, is he brings out a slide rule and a fountain pen. And he said the students nowadays don't know what they are. And I think that perhaps he could do half of his and half of yours. But you've got a treasure trove. And it's not fair that you keep it to yourself.
Well, you're absolutely right. The only trouble is today is basically finance, I suppose, is the big problem. One, you've got to find space. And then there is always the question. I mean, I would never reject anything like that. And I agree with you that it should be shared, largely because it's not mine necessarily. The reason that I got all these things is because it related to everybody else. I bought something because I thought it was iconic at the time. And as a result of that, it was relevant at the time and may not be relevant now. But the fact is, it is still of interest, and you learn from it, of course, which is the other thing too. Obviously, iconic figures like Max Miller, we've been there before. We know all about Max, or do we, of course? And the lovely Mabel Lucy Atwell, who was the children's illustrator. So much to talk about her, with her links to this town, by the way. We've touched on that before. No, you're quite right.
I think you get Guinness to sponsor it or something. You know, my goodness, my Guinness. Do you remember the Pelican?
Yes, of course I do. Yes, exactly. Well, Guinness, of course. Again, I've got one or two iconic items relating to Guinness. You name it, basically. Radio, obviously, we talk about the Radio Times. And I'm sure our viewers will also recall many of those days. And on the other hand, there's a lot of them were saying, well, I don't know what they're talking about.
Well, it's one of the things that I like about these chats that you and I have is we actually go back in the world of broadcasting to almost anybody else alive today.
Oh, yeah. Well,
you were 1963.
Oh, well,
yes. And strangely enough, that was the year that I started with CBC in Vancouver.
It was a good year.
It was a very good year. It produced us.
Yeah. Well, absolutely right. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when I was at the school, you see, I mean, we had this careers master who really wasn't. I mean, basically, all he wanted to do was to get home back to the wife. But he occasionally went round saying, right, okay, wait, Martin, what are you going to do? And Martin told, Henty, what are you going to do? And I said, broadcaster. And then he moved on, you see. And that was the amount of sort of encouragement I got at the time. Now, the best thing is that it all started in hospital radio, which is very important, still going strong today. I thought there would be one other item relating to this time of the year, which you might like to see. I hadn't finished looking in the bag. You see, this is now this is quite.
It is a wonderful bag. It's in Aladdin's cave.
This is the bag.
Except that it's a Henty cave.
Villagers. We're being joined by the good landlord here. The wonderful pub.
Is the chief of staff coming in?
Yes, chief of staff.
Morning, chief of staff.
Lovely man.
Yeah.
Lovely man.
Oh, yes, there's Declan.
I saw it.
Yeah.
Declan, is it?
Declan. Is it Declan?
Yes.
Yes.
I think so.
I can't see behind me.
No. Well, I think it is. Well, anyway, look ahead of you, because this. Now, for goodness sake.
Oh, how lovely.
Now, there we are, children. Hello, children everywhere. Who used to say that? Uncle Mac. Now, this is a cat, a Christmassy cat. It's got a hat on, and you don't see many of these days. And it's a very talented one. For example, if would you like it to sing?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
Are you ready for this then? Now, you going to sing? Please sing.
The thing that I like about all the things that you bring in, John, is they're all terribly modest.
Yes.
Because they sing just before coming. Oh, there we go.
People think that I don't know about jingle bells and mistletoe, but how I love Christmas. You say happy holidays, I've got to say it in my own way, and means Merry Christmas.
Wonderful.
By a crackling fire will take long winter nights.
The trouble is, I don't know how to stop it.
Well, let's enjoy this little song for a minute, shall we?
Panorama, forget it.
Cause means Merry Christmas.
Hey!
Rock.
Now, John, is between us, we always have.
Excuse me. Carry on.
Stop interrupting it.
Yeah, shut up.
Is we usually have brilliant ideas while we're talking here, totally unscripted. This is always totally unscripted. You know, they have from time to time.
Go on, ignore it.
Yes, from time to time on television with terribly famous people, an evening with.
Oh yeah.
Now, I'm going to suggest that when we're taking a break over Christmas, folks,
Right, yes.
when we come back on the 8th,
Yes.
that during that period, that you and I formulate a program for Mirador, an evening with Henty and Hayes, the two H's.
God.
They're the two B's.
Well,
But, you know, it just occurred to me, once we started to talk about broadcasting and going back to 63, all sorts of things that, a bit like Mark Mady's pens and slide rules, is people don't realize we used to take the phone apart and put what we call crocodile clips so you could make a voice report. You know, nowadays, all you do is you just hit a button on a computer. Yes, that's right.
razor blades,
Absolutely.
Chinagraph
pencils is. I mean, I think there's a story to be told there.
I think there is. The only danger there, I suppose, is, you know, people saying, "Oh, well, a couple of old farts just going on about their."
I love being an old fart.
Oh.
It's embarrassing. I have to tell you, even though, like you, I ache a little now and again, this is the best period of my life. I'm having a wonderful time.
Well, then,
And when you come in, I have a totally wonderful time.
well, everybody says that. I mean, that is the thing. That is why I'm so stretched at this time of the year. Because apart from the usual Father Christmas bit, which I shall be probably doing fairly soon. That's it. We're going to have a sort of phone in for Santa.
Well, indeed.
We could organise that as well.
Yes, we can. And we there is a way of doing phone in here. I need somebody who understands computers a little bit,
Yes.
but we can actually do a phone in.
Well, we need a witch. That's the answer. A witch is probably the answer,
Yes.
because they wouldn't bother with that. They would just simply go,
Yeah.
just like that, just like that. Who used to say that? Just like that, just like that. Tommy Cooper. Tommy Cooper.
Yes.
Do you know, I'm glad that cat. Quite entertaining. You know,
Absolutely.
I mean,
yeah,
how many people
yeah,
have got one of those in their house?
Yeah.
Point five.
Do you remember a 1950s, 1960s television program about a witch? And they had a very cute girl who would wiggle her nose. And she had the guy.
Oh, yes.
And she was married to an astronaut.
Oh, yes, I do remember. Every time she wiggled her nose, something happened.
That's right.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be marvellous to be able to do that?
Absolutely.
One, to wiggle your nose. I mean, that's not easy.
Yeah.
I don't- Try it. Go on. There's a lady that. Wait a minute. There's a lady there in Littlehampton. A lady there in Littlehampton who's trying to your nose, dear, not your toes. Oh, dear. Wiggle your nose. Yes, I know. It's a thought. I mean, I love magic anyway. We mentioned Tommy Cooper and maybe a few magical tricks. We did try one on Mirador, I remember, that worked. All those cards that I had and you had to choose. I love
That's
magic.
right. Yes. I actually, there was one that you tried to make me disappear, and that worked.
Don't tell other people, it may catch on. I tell you, this is the time of the year, of course. I remember in London when there used to be magic shows. There was I can't remember now the name of it. It'll come to me in a moment. There were magic shows that you could go to, a whole evening of magical performances.
Yes.
By well-known. I mean, nothing like that. There is one man who used to go to my school, by the way, whose name is Darren Brown, I think it is. In point of fact, he is a most mysterious man, but he employs all modern techniques. In other words, smartphones and all the rest of it. And I went to see him at the Theatre Royal, and I'm afraid he lost me because a lot of it was sort of above my head.
Yeah.
But he's a remarkable man, and he's created on television a whole series of strange happenings where things have moved about and stuff like that. It's still going on. It's still going on, and you've got to believe it as well.
Yes.
You know.
Well, actually, I don't very often tune into Britain's Got Talent, but just once in a while, they have on a modern country.
We should bring it.
And they do remarkable things.
Yeah.
Now I realise that they've got all the magic of video and so on at their fingertips. But nonetheless, now you see him and now you don't, and then he ends up in the back of the auditorium. It's quite clever.
It is remarkable stuff, yes, and still very entertaining. I'm sure there are people out there. There is, I think, even within this Sussex area, there are people who get together frequently to have little meetings and showing each other
magic circles and so on.
And of course, there used to be a lovely shop. Where was it now? It was in Blackpool, actually, on the seafront in Blackpool. That I think it was Tommy Cooper's shop. He actually had a shop in Blackpool, and you could buy the most marvellous tricks and things there. I bought several. Went there on one occasion and bought one.
Have you got them? Have you got them?
Have I still got them? Let me just think for a moment. I think shall I bring one in?
Yes.
It's not always necessarily good on television, but we'll see. I'll have a look.
So that's one of it is.
It would be quite nice to have some magical tricks.
That's
what Christmas was all about.
Not only that, but as you point out, we don't see these things very often on television anymore. And one of the things, there are two programs that do delve into the past. One, as I was talking about, is Mark Mabey, Professor Mark Mabey, who's kept all these wonderful things like a fountain pen and a fob watch. And the view with all these wonderful things from the past. Sometimes it is good to dwell in the past because it puts the future in some sort of context. So we're very, very lucky to have you and Mark approaching past things from a different angle.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've just seen a man going past there. Do you often see people in this town? This is typical of Lewis again. He had a roll of material under his arm, and I think he was probably going off to a yoga class. You know, they take their own mats, you see.
Right.
And so there he was going along. Or he may be going, and this is why I'm keeping an eye on the time now, because I told you this time last week, now that I'm on a Thursday as opposed to a Wednesday, that church over there, a very nice church, has coffee and cakes, and it's available until 11 o'clock.
Did you go last week?
I didn't go. Did you? No.
I was still there.
Oh, you're still
here, unfortunately. Mark, maybe the reason that today's schedule is a bit different is his mother died. So it was her funeral. And, so he begged off, and quite rightly so.
Well, lots of love to him and to everybody else. And still doing it. I know. Wonderful.
John, we've got a few minutes this morning still.
It's been fun.
Can you tell us, in your memory, the comics? Because I know that you've got the annuals. Comics. Do you remember, for instance, the first issue of The Eagle?
Yes, I do.
Is The Eagle still going?
I don't think there is a comic called The Eagle now. I was pleased to see in a shop that they're selling Beano annuals and Dandy annuals, and there's also a Rupert the Bear annual for 2023, which is encouraging. Now, The Eagle started around in 1952 or so, and I was one of the first people to join it. It was edited by a man called Marcus Morris, I think I'm right in saying. It had Dan Dare, of course, in the very early days of space travel. Exactly. And they organized in the very early days little groups of people in various areas, young people meeting together and going to various events. And funnily enough, I went to one of the very first events, which was in the Croydon area, and it was to a circus. We all went to the circus with Eagle members of staff and everything. And so it was a splendid comic, and now very collectible. If you've got
absolutely.
Number one, Eagle would be worth a lot of money.
Now you mentioned the Beano. The Beano is still in existence.
Yes.
And where is it located?
Dundee.
No.
Where?
Fleet Street.
Really?
Yes. And the son of one of our friends, Alex Kirby, a well-known gentleman around town, former BBC editor, is one of the editors on it. Yes.
Well, no, I said Dundee because actually that was the other one. That was the other one. So yours is Beano, did you say?
Beano.
I think Dandy
Ah,
was Dandy Dundee.
Was
And it was run by a very tough man who knew what he was doing, and it's still going strong today. And it was a non-union area. So one or two journalists didn't have a lot of time for that particular comic, simply because it was employing non-union people, which is a bit...
Yeah. Well, those are the days when they had, when the unions had such a huge grip on the media. Yeah,
absolutely.
It really did.
Ever been to Dundee?
No. Oh, yes. Well, no. Sorry. I've been to Dumfries, not Dundee. Yeah.
Well, Dumfries, Dundee. Dunwoody. I mean, Gwyneth Dunwoody.
Oh,
say no more. Well, I'm done, to be honest with you. I'm really ought to be moving on.
All right.
Busy time, isn't there? Sort of lots of things to try and think and worry about, I suppose. But I wish everybody well. Wish you well again, Keith.
Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Yeah,
I take it, and we'll hope to see you on the 18th.
Oh,
But then, as I'm getting quite excited about this idea of an evening with the two H's, and because one of the things that I find, strangely enough, is the things that some modern people go poo-poo.
Yes.
Is if you start at a dinner party or something talking about these things, people say, "I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that." And they're the sort of things that we talk about.
Exactly. Well, we're obviously available for dinner parties.
Absolutely.
Contact this number now.
We like to select the wines.
I might even buy a new jacket and a bow tie. I'm not sure. There's the postman. Good God, he's coming in here. Well,
he can't get through the door, I don't think. There's been one young man at 10 o'clock this morning hammering on the door for a drink.
Did he? No, yes. Oh, well, good luck to them. As I said last time, I was a postman for a short time, and it's quite a joyous thing. Yet on the television only last night, on some Tunbridge Wells television, they were talking about people complaining. It's like, no, he never turns up here and all that stuff. These are tough times, actually. And suddenly the other madness is that, through the rest of the year, there's a sort of little trickle. And then suddenly, whoosh, so all the same people who are doing all the old sorting suddenly find they've got about 8 million letters and stuff and bits and pieces and parcels. No. Oh, well, the parcels, that's the other thing. I'm waiting on a parcel. That's another reason why I should get going, actually. Because I've got
exciting stuff.
I got some. Most recently, I did order 24 tins of tomato juice. We won't go into that, but that was quite good. Except it was delivered to the wrong house. So these people say, "Well, who's ordered 24 tins of tomato juice?" They say it's probably that man. Oh, him. Oh, yeah. Well, he always was eccentric. I think he's a witch, actually. Yeah, I think he's a male witch. So there you are.
Now, I will go home with some anticipation because I'm expecting a little parcel today. And as you well know, my relaxation at midnight, when I get off work, is playing with a little N-Gauge train, putting it together. And I have ordered a little coal merchant with the horse and dray, pulling it, and a brewery one, right, just that size. And today is the day that they're supposed to arrive. So I'm full of anticipation.
What gauge is that?
N-Gauge. That's the very little one. Yes.
Oh, I shall remember that. Yes, because the little shops down here, the wonderful antique emporiums here in Lewis, you can always go looking around there.
Absolutely.
And they were lovely little toys and things.
Oh, marvelous.
I bought something very recently. Tell you about it next Thursday.
All right.
Got to go.
Okay.
Right. Come on, Puss.
John, thank you. As usual, scintillating conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
Very enjoyable. Yes, there's the famous bag. There isn't something in there that you didn't show us, is there?
What?
No, it's all right. I thought you were keeping something from us.
Oh,
All right.
So.
Well, there we are. Is John Henty, and as usual, full of surprises and tricks, bits and pieces from the past, and very happy we are to see them. So this morning we have had a good old shufti at the news, which is depressing as old hell. We've had a look at the weather. We've had a look at the battle on Lewes Racecourse, which is articulated in Brighton Rock, Graham Greene's famous novel of the 1930s, when the gangs were rampant in Brighton. And we've had the past according to Mr. Henty. So I think that it's been a fair old session. Very happy to be with you, and we will, as usual, say toodle pip in a moment, and we'll be back tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow morning with the two Bs, the two barristers, and then we have various people along as usual to fill out the Friday before we actually take off for the weekend. So let us say toodle pip, let us say goodbye, and I hope that you'll join us at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Even though we've been a bit frustrating with the technicals at the moment, that occurs from time to time, and it's because, as John says, we're too old for art, and some of this stuff gets beyond us. But nonetheless, we persevere, and we try to bring you stuff you won't find anywhere else. So, from the Black Horse, until tomorrow morning, Keith Hayes, Mirador Television, and the great cast of characters that we have, saying goodbye. From Lewes, in the Black Horse pub.